Welcome to the 27th episode of The Lucid Truth, The Psychedelic Shift with Heather Wade. This episode is a bit different, as I'm the guest on Heather's show, The Kingdom of Nye. Heather is the protege of Art Bell, the host of the immensely popular paranormal late-night talk show Coast to Coast AM. I had called in on one of Heather's episodes about lucid dreaming, since she had Robert Wagner on, who studies lucid dreams. I happen to own one of his books. And my questions ended in an invitation to appear on Heather's show, as well as Robert coming on The Lucid Truth, which is episode 23. In this episode, Heather and I discuss many facets of the psychedelic experience for the individual, and consider the implications these mental tools may have on society, as well as the future of humanity. So please welcome Heather Wade.
This is the Kingdom of Nye with Heather Wade.
Oh my God, I think that's me. All right. Well, let me just head on over very quickly because apparently you are all feeling what I'm feeling. I'm not alone in this. We are all sort of feeling that something that's floating in the air. What Marilyn Hughes was talking about when she said it happens in the energy before it happens on the ground. And that is a rather interesting thought. So just one moment here while I do this. Vaughn says in the Looking Glass, I only wish I was tripping right now. Because even if it was a bad one, this would qualify. It would be over in just a few hours. I am not sensing any return to reality in the near future. Too many people have been knocked too far out of their comfort zone to make it an easy landing, to make an easy landing possible. And that is really interesting. And maybe tonight's discussion about psychedelics is quite timely, as we were talking about this show's sort of emergent, personality that it has, its own soul that it has. I'm just along for the ride like all of you. But sometimes the only way out of an impossible situation can be a psychedelic trip. And Isaac, I'm sure, will explain that to us as we go along. And so it is so timely and so absolutely wonderfully synchronistic that we have Isaac Lindenberger tonight. Because sometimes the best thing that can be done, and this may be controversial that I'm about to say this, and you may change your opinion of me after I say this, I don't know. But sometimes, in an impossible situation that life throws at you, the psychedelic trip is just the thing. Now, I am not telling everybody that they need to go out and do that, and I am certainly not telling anybody to go break any laws. But tonight we are going to be talking about some drugs. I just want you to know that. And so, let us properly introduce our guest this evening. Distinguished guest Isaac Lindenberger is a psychedelic researcher and host of the Lucid Truth podcast. He works with many professionals, including Dr. Rick Strassman, who wrote DMT, The Spirit Molecule, and Richard Lang, who wrote The Man Without a Head. Isaac has studied ayahuasca with the Church of Santo Daime. I hope I'm saying that right. Daime? I'm sure Isaac will tell me. Anyway, he studied with the church in Brazil, attending their school of abstract thought to learn how to travel through different dimensions within the mind. Tonight, Isaac Lindenberger joins us to discuss the inner landscape, the power and potential of psychedelics, and the mysterious nature of consciousness. And what a pleasure and really, truly a treat to welcome Isaac Lindenberger to the show with us tonight. Isaac, welcome to the show. How you doing tonight, okay?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Heather.
Well, it sure is. God, listen to you. God, you sound so good. Listen to that perfect audio. 10 out of 10, Isaac.
Thank you.
I am impressed. That is amazing. Well, I'm so happy that you called, this happy accident here that brought our paths to crossing. like this, and I think you probably heard before I brought you on what I was talking about, that sometimes in an extreme situation, in extreme cases, a psychedelic trip can be just the thing. Have you found that in your experience? Do you find that sometimes that can be the medicine?
Yeah, I find that to be especially true when you least expect it. So psychedelics have this amazing potential for a long duration of therapy. So you have the experience and you think, man, that was amazing, but then you keep getting benefits from it over time. Even if it was kind of a negative psychedelic experience, it can still be beneficial. Kind of like periods of depression where you come out of it stronger. So it depends, but I would agree with that, especially now when the collective consciousness is so assaulted by so many negative aspirations in the world. It can be really good to kind of, like Timothy Leary said, tune out a little bit and look at things from a broader perspective.
Interesting. Really, really interesting. Well, certainly sounds like you know your stuff, and like this, none of this is strange to you or unfamiliar to you. And you have a show. I want to talk about this here. You have a show, The Lucid Truth. Why did you start your show?
I started my show because I thought it would be a unique opportunity to connect with professionals about the nature of consciousness. So we've had Rick Strassman was probably my favorite guest we've had so far. And with him, we talked about how to actually prove the psychedelic landscape exists objectively. So I want to talk about that a little bit later, but that's a really fun topic. And we've also had John McAfee on, the guy that made the antivirus software. And he talked about his psychedelic experiences, and those were quite a trip. So it's a good opportunity to be able to connect with people who you might not otherwise get the chance to talk to. So that's pretty much why I started it.
Oh, interesting. Well, and those are all very interesting people, which brings me to the next subject, the psychedelic shift. Because so many people are writing about this, so many people are interested in this. It's its own subculture out there. Do you think that there's a reason behind that? Why are we getting so interested in psychedelic drugs? In the past, I mean, this is not new, but I mean, new-ish to the culture, 10, 15 years, this thing has just been ramping up like nobody's business.
Well, psychedelics give you the opportunity to explore the inner landscape. And regardless of the objectivity or subjectivity of that landscape, whether or not it's real or just a product of the mind, you can go within and learn information that makes your life better. It improves subjective well-being and makes your relationship with the universe and other people better. And regardless of the higher truth associated with psychedelics, that's something that can be found by anybody who uses them. So I think people are starting to awaken to the higher purpose that psychedelics can offer, and it's starting to lead to a paradigm shift. It is a real shift that's leading to the evolution of consciousness. And the suppression of psychedelics by the culture, it's losing its grip. That's why it's becoming legal in Denver, Colorado, all over the world. I think within the next 10 years, psychedelics will be legal everywhere. So, and I think that's why.
Interesting. Well, I wonder if it isn't the culture itself being so empty, right? And so mundane, that people are longing to reach out for something interesting, a wild experience. Humans have wanted to change their consciousness and toyed around with changing their consciousness in all kinds of ways since before recorded history, right? And so it, to me, is no surprise that the modern culture is just sort of boring and constricting and very, oppressive in some ways. There's a routine. And, after a while, you get tired of the routine, Isaac. I really don't think humans were meant to constantly repeat the same thing every day. Constantly go into work, and be there for 9 hours a day and then go home. And really, there's a lack of fulfillment. And do you think psychedelics fill that empty spot and provide that fulfillment?
I think psychedelics show you how to fill that yourself. So I think it can be done without psychedelics, but they're an amazing shortcut. So that's one of the problems with the evolution of secularism in science. I mean, science is an amazing tool, don't get me wrong, but the mindset associated with the strictly material world, it leads to an increase in the philosophy of nihilism. And it's kind of depressing. Like, life doesn't mean anything. There's no higher purpose. And in Jungian psychology, nihilism is an escape of moral responsibility at the cost of hopelessness. And psychedelics fight this. They show you why you actually see firsthand why life itself means something, because consciousness is the carrier of all value, and nobody is telling you this. You're not listening to it in a lecture or seeing it in a video. You're experiencing it firsthand. You have a direct relationship with the meaning of your own existence, and it's something I don't think you can ever forget once you see it. So I do think psychedelics are the prescription to treat that societal ailment.
Wow. That's a profound statement. I've thought this, I don't know, maybe for the last 2, maybe 3 years, that something is really missing. There's just something very important missing in our civilization, and I believe the more I thought about it, the more I talked to people on the show and not on the show, it's meaning that is missing from us. What we have is consumerism. We have the accumulation of wealth. We have prestige and reputation. We have all of those things. None of those things provide true meaning. We also have a separation between each other. People don't drop by people's houses anymore. People ghost each other nowadays and this sort of thing. People are sort of disposable. And then that slowly chips away at any meaning the regular guy was holding on to. And then here he runs across this trippy thing like mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT. Maybe a friend says, "Hey, I have some mushrooms. You want to try that this weekend?" And he takes that, and then he comes out of that with a new perspective. And it's no wonder that we see that, in my opinion, it's no wonder that we see that going on nowadays. If the civilization we have would allow for at least some spirituality or some meaning, maybe we wouldn't have this. But I'm all for life getting more interesting, and psychedelics certainly do that.
Yes, and they do it so reliably too. It's really amazing. If you compare it to meditation, it might not work for you. I mean, it might not. It takes time usually. You're not totally sure something's going to happen. But 2 hits of LSD-25 underneath your tongue will certainly have an effect. That much is guaranteed. And it's that reliability in the psychedelic substance themselves that you can count on. It's dependable. And it's going to show you something within your mind that's worth seeing, even if it's a little scary. Bad trips aren't very common. They're about 1 in 100, I'd say. But even those you find value from. So either way, you're going to see something that you can come back with to use to make your life better, as long as you're paying attention to what to look for.
Well, what do we look for?
Well, there's this big stigma around psychedelics where, if you're just taking them for fun, you're not really tripping or something like that. And I feel like even if you're using a psychedelic, which psychedelic means mind manifesting, so it's going to manifest the inner nature of your mind, even if you're using it within, let's say, at a festival or something like that, there's still something to be seen there because it's right on the surface. So it's not necessarily like you have to look for something that it's going to show you either way. The important part is remembering what it shows you and kind of paying attention to it and integrating it into your experience. So I would say integration is the most important part, because you could have this amazing experience that makes your life better, but if you forget about it and never think about it again, you lose a lot of the potential value that was there to be found.
Well, I've never met anybody who had a powerful psychedelic trip and then forgot about it. It does tend to stick with a person.
Yes, it does.
It does tend to be that, one of the things that I noticed across people over the years, one of the most common set of words or common sentence that I would hear from people after they have their first trip or 2 or 3 is they would say, "I discovered the secrets. I understand now." And you're right. There wasn't anybody standing over their shoulder explaining anything to them. It's a path of true self-discovery, and you would see it in their face. The face would just light up and their eyes would sparkle. I understand now. And I wish we had more of that in our world.
Yeah, it's kind of like Inception, where you can't just tell the person the thing in the dream and have them benefit from it in real life. They have to realize it on their own. Otherwise, it doesn't have any value to them. And psychedelics are this amazing tool that shows you it on your own. And you see it. There's a popular example where psychedelics take you to the top of an elevator, and you see this amazing party going on in this metaphysical universe that you never knew was happening. And then it brings you down to the first floor. And you're back in reality, but you don't forget that there's that top floor. And it enhances your life and makes it meaningful. And it also shows you that the first floor isn't like less than the top floor. It's one with it. They're not actually separate. They're together. And that realization is something that can really enhance somebody's life subjectively. And I think that's the most important part of it.
Well, how long have you been at this? And what got you interested in this subject?
Well, I have been researching psychedelics for a long time. I would probably say it was I was 15. I saw DMT, the Spirit Molecule, on Netflix. It's produced by Joe Rogan and Dr. Rick Strassman, who we were talking about earlier. And the documentary explores how DMT takes you backwards through your own DNA into the universe. DMT specifically is a psychedelic that's produced in the human body, which is one of the reasons why it's interesting. I like to call it divine moments of truth, DMT. And I've been interested in DMT for a long time. And since that interest first initially was generated, it kind of stuck. And it's what ended up leading me to go to Brazil to research DMT, because the Church of Santo Daime, they can legally use DMT in the United States. They beat the Supreme Court and won a Supreme Court case to use it in the U.S. So I thought, hey, I want to open a DMT church. So I emailed the Church of Santo Daime, and they were like, hey, yeah, we'll let you open a church, but you got to come to Brazil. And I don't think they actually expected me to, but I was like, all right, I'll pack up. Let's go. And that's what what took me down there.
Oh, I love it. That is great. That is great. Well, then that is similar to the Navajo. A friend of mine was actually president of the Peyote Foundation, who worked with also the Supreme Court to allow the Navajo and the natives, the indigenous peoples from the whole Southwest out here, to allow them to legally use peyote in their teepee ceremonies. And I've even had the honor of being in, I think 2 teepee ceremonies. It's really, really interesting to them. And so similar thing then, with the DMT. Now, do they use DMT or is it ayahuasca?
So it is like ayahuasca, but they call it daime. And, daime is an entheogen. So en means within, theo means theology. So an entheogen generates the divine within. So it's like a fancy name for psychedelic. And, daime is fermented ayahuasca. So it's got the 2 ingredients, the MAOI, which makes it to where you can drink the DMT, otherwise it won't be orally active, and it has the DMT. And it's funny because this has been an indigenous brew for thousands of years, and these plants are miles and hundreds of thousands of miles away from each other. No one knows how they figured out to connect them. And if you ask the shamans, they'll tell you, well, the plants told them how. So that's their answer.
That's another aspect of this whole thing that I just love. The other story that I've heard is that one of the shamans dreamed it and then knew to combine those 2 ingredients. We gotta run to a break here, Isaac, but we're certainly off to a really good start, and I want to pick it up from here when we come back from the break. So it's the Church of Santo Daime, is that right?
Yes, the Church of Santo Daime.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Nothing is more embarrassing than pronouncing something like that incorrectly and then completely disrespecting the whole church. I don't want to do that. Let us run into a break, Isaac. I know this is going to be an interesting night, and I have a lot of questions. I have a whole lot of questions about this phenomenon, and we really ought to look closely at this. If the indigenous people have done this for as long as they have, you must ask why. Why are they doing that? They are getting some sort of immense benefit from that among their culture. And what could we in the industrialized culture learn from that? I think the industrialized culture would have gone this direction anyway. And I think it is going that way anyway, and there's nothing that can stop it. I'm Heather Wade. Isaac Lindenberger is with us tonight to talk about the psychedelic shift, and we'll be right back. Isaac Lindenberger is here tonight, and we're talking about the psychedelic shift, which gives me the perfect opportunity to play one of my favorite songs. This is called The Journey of the Warrior by Tulku, and all of their music is inspired by ayahuasca. And welcome back, Isaac. I hope you got a kick out of that. I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. I have a little fun with the music on the show here whenever I can.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard that song on a psychedelic before.
Really? In the middle of your...
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
like the psychedelic played the song for me.
Right. Well, I would not be surprised. Like I say, all their music is inspired by ayahuasca. Sometimes the titles of their songs are even... I know there's one that's called... ayahuasca dream or something like that. Anyway, they're all about it. Yeah, maybe I'll copy those CDs and send them to you. You may get a kick out of that. But before the break, we were talking about the Church of Santo Daime in Brazil, and you went down there. You've got my attention with this. I love a good adventure. So, what in the world possessed you to do that? And tell me all about it. When you went down there, what was that like? You met them. What was involved with, I mean, it says here in your bio, you attended their school of abstract thought to learn how to travel through different dimensions within the mind. There has got to be a story there, Isaac.
Yes, there certainly is. It's a crazy one. The thing that got me to go down there was I wanted to start a church myself, and they said that they would help me. Mm-hmm. But then they were like, okay, you have to come to Brazil. And I said, okay, let's do it. So me and two friends went down there, and the whole idea we had was if we can open churches for psychedelics in the United States, we can help with the revolution of consciousness, because the external reflects the internal. You're not going to change the world by changing the external world. The better way to do it is by changing the interior landscape, and the world will then reflect that. So it's kind of along the lines we were thinking. So we went down there, and it was really crazy. The ceremonies were amazing. They speaking of their brew, you know how the old story Jesus turned water into wine? Mm-hmm. They think he turned it into daime, because daime is a wine. So he would make a brew that ascends your consciousness to the creator instead of one like alcohol that inhibits your consciousness. So I thought that was interesting local lore, to say the least.
Yeah, that is. That's an unexpected aspect. But when you go down to Brazil to do something like this, I guess there's going to be a lot of things that are unexpected surprises.
Yeah, that's for sure. The way that the ceremonies worked were very interesting too. You wouldn't expect it. They would dance. So you would dance for about 8 hours straight. And the dances, the amount of walking we did, was the equivalent of like 13 miles, like half a marathon, just on these powerful psychedelics all together dancing. Now, there was one time I remember there was a wedding of the daughter of the padrino. And the padrino is like the lead shaman. And we're all sitting there, and she gets pulled up a mountain in a horse and carriage in the center of this mystical valley. And there's 80 of us, and we all took the psychedelic, the ayahuasca. And when they got married, they chipped their ayahuasca cups together and drank it. And the ceremony began. And we all danced all night on the psych. I want a marriage like that, like, can I have that too?
Oh,
like,
that is the way
amazing.
to do it. Yeah, that is absolutely the way to do it. Well, that must have been, God, the energy of that, I can just imagine. That had to, and what a way to start a union. You know.
Yeah.
God. Well,
Tell me about it.
is the dancing a part of the journey, a part of the learning experience, a part of the trip, if you will, itself?
Yeah, there's two different kinds of ceremonies in the Santo Daime Church. There are concentrations, where basically you meditate and you focus on your inner experience. And then there's the Hanarios, where you sing the hymns along with the dances, and you're singing these hymns to ground you. And it helps for large groups to kind of control the environment to where no one's getting an experience that's kind of out of hand or too extreme or anything like that. So the two different ceremonies are pretty different. But for the Hanarios, we're singing in Portuguese. I don't know Portuguese, so I'm like probably messing up the words terribly, but I'm trying my best. And then the psychedelic starts to kick in and the words start to jumble, and eventually sometimes you have to stop trying to sing in Portuguese because you just can't. You got to focus on the dancing, and it's really insane. I would say the most learning experiences I've had were probably the concentrations, because it was like a meditation. There's one in particular that was really amazing that I'm thinking of now, but yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic to see firsthand.
Well, is there some preparation involved with experiencing an ayahuasca trip? Because I don't think you would just go and sit in the hut and then they hand it to you. Is there some sort of, I really wouldn't know, but I mean, I would think there'd be some steps to take before you get to that point.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, and turns out I was in for a surprise. First day we wake up in the village after we had gotten situated. Pedro, our guide, shows up at our little hut, and he knocks on the door and he's like, "Hey, all right, guys, get ready. We're going to take Daime now at 9 a.m., first thing in the morning, and we're going to go on a walk." And I was like, wait, what? I ate meat last night. I thought you were supposed to have a special diet and everything, just to, prepare. He's like, "Nope, don't worry about it. I ate meat last night too. To drink up." I was like, okay. So I chug it down, and so did my friends. And within 20 minutes, I experienced the purge where I throw up, and it comes right back out. And Pedro says this was my first inner demon releasing itself from my body. And then he's like, "Okay, you just drank out your Daime. Here, you have to drink more now."
Oh my God.
So after I throw it up, he's like, the first thing is like, "Okay, you got to drink up what you just, put out."
Yeah.
And I drink it up again, and we go to a river, and it was interesting because what I was expecting out of the brew was basically a DMT-like experience, where I have a very, like, an experience in another dimension. And it was more like a redirection of thought. Like, it was still very powerfully psychedelic, but it wasn't like dimension jumping up until one really powerful experience that I experienced later. But most of the ceremonies were a little more contained within the real world. And I figured out how to use that for the most beneficial aspects of the experience.
Wow.
That's what the first one was like.
The first one. So I take it there were a series of these experiences?
Oh, yeah. I was there for like 40 days, and there was one every other day. So it was intense. There were a lot of experiences. And there was, so the first one kind of threw us in for a ride. We didn't expect it. But they did have lectures and trainings and things to help you understand what you were experiencing. And that's where the School of Abstract Thought comes into play. So the shamans would tell us things like, here, I'll even try to give you this in a shaman voice. They would say things like, "There exist other dimensions we cannot physically travel to. We can still access these dimensions, but it is just not physical travel, and it cannot be. One of the aspects of conscious evolution is the ability to access other dimensions. In the spirit, it is completely possible to travel the entire universe. Where are these dimensions? They are within our consciousness. Where is consciousness? It is inside ourselves. So that's the kind of thing they would talk about to help you understand the experience.
Wow. God, that ties in a lot of things that I've actually heard from other guests. You know, we tend to talk about spirituality and consciousness and all these other phenomena, and it seems like we're always dancing around that the key is within us. And to just draw a couple of very strange parallels, I keep bringing up Marilyn Hughes because, gosh, did that lady ever have some interesting things to say? She said out-of-body travel is the key to everything. And if you had heard her say it, she said it with such confidence and conviction, you just believed it when she said it. And then another parallel, which people may or may not like that I'm bringing up this parallel, but, I think it was Jesus who said the kingdom of heaven is within you. And what is heaven but another dimension, Isaac, right?
Yeah, one of the shamans actually said that quote you just said. So that's remarkably synchronistic. You brought up that exact line.
Well, these are just weird things that I think about in the middle of the night for no real good reason at all. But it's very interesting that you go down to Brazil and you have this experience with these shamans, and this is what they're telling you, what a lot of consciousness researchers, scientists are getting into this stuff now and starting to explore this. I know Dr. Dennis McKenna is hooked up with the university, and they study all of this. I'm pretty sure you're aware that I think the FDA has recently approved psilocybin mushrooms as a treatment for depression and as a treatment for those in hospice. Right now, this is real. This is really happening. This isn't just a bunch of kids, smoking weed in the middle of the night, listening to Led Zeppelin kind of talk. This is really happening now. And people are seeing real benefits of it. And here you are going down to learn all of this and then form your own church. So what does that exactly entail, forming your own church about all of this? Are you, when you have your own church of Santo Daime, does that mean you take people on their own trips?
Yeah, well, the Church of Santo Daime, so in the United States, they beat the Supreme Court case. It was Jonathan Goldman. So this man had been using Daime in the United States for a long time. And then eventually the DEA kicks in his door and arrests him. And then they see, he's got saints and all these, spiritual things in his house. This guy isn't a drug lord. Like, this isn't Escobar. This is like a pastor, And he fought 10 years to get the right to use Daime in the United States. And he finally won. And that's actually who the Church of Santo Daime linked my group up with. So when we got back to the United States, we met with Jonathan Goldman and experienced a ceremony with him in Maryland. His home church is in Ashland, Oregon. And
Ashland, Oregon. I'm not surprised. I've been there. I used to live right near there for a little while. I lived in Talent, Oregon. So yeah, that's I'm not surprised. Ashland, Oregon is just a trippy place in general. Okay, that
yes,
makes
it is.
some sense. Yeah, okay, all right. I'm listening.
Well, that's we're not really sure where that's going. Right now, I'm still interested in opening a church, but right now I'm focused on research. I'm trying to understand the experience itself and what it means. And so I have a theory about what happens in it. And also, I'll tell you a little bit about one of the experience I had in Brazil that was like the pinnacle of all this. And then I'll kind of explore some of the research for you.
Oh, that sounds great. Yes. I'm all ears.
Okay, cool. So during an intense trip, the inhabited organism, the individual, and the surrounding environment, they come under increasingly greater scrutiny from the awakening higher self. And this four-dimensional self begins to feel and it senses the operation of energies within your dream body. And you can actually feel this. Awareness stretches down to encompass energetic activities occurring at the cellular, molecular, atomic, and subatomic level. And to understand these experiences, you really have to pay attention to what's going on. So this is really interesting how this all ties in synchronistically. But my first DMT trip, and this plays into my last one in Brazil. But my first DMT trip, I was in the United States. I was 16, and I was younger, and we had gotten some DMT, and my friend thought it was fake. He was like, "Oh, this isn't real." So he takes a big rip of it, and he runs outside, and jumps down the stairs, and he gets in his car, and he drives away.
No,
We're like, what is going on? So he calls us back 15 minutes later, and he's like, guys, the lines in the road were coming off the road into my eyes. That is not a time to drive.
No, that would indicate pull over.
Yeah, well, this guy was insane. So he was like, well, it's real. So once we found out my friend was safe, I was like, okay, well, I don't have my keys on me, and I'm not going to do anything crazy like that. So I had my experience, and this is a gravity bong. So it's like very intense. And I'm expecting, because I've been interested in DMT for a long time, I'm expecting a experience that inspires me and shows me the truth of the universe and makes me super happy, all this stuff.
Mechanical elves.
Yes, all of this. And instead, I felt like I was really small. Like, in comparison to the vast, huge, infinite universe, I'm just this tiny speck. And it was actually really depressing. And I did not expect that at all, because I've been hyping DMT for years. And then I have this bad trip, quote unquote, and I'm like, it's actually kind of depressing. What was all that about, right? So I realized what I experienced in Brazil. So when I was there, I had this really intense concentration. And the concentration is the experience where you go within, and it's a concentrated meditation. And we took a really large serving of daime, along with some Santa Maria, which is cannabis. It's their sacred name for cannabis. So it was a double duo there. And I was really confident that the experience was going to be great. And it was great. But to get to heaven, I had to go through hell. Halfway through, my hand is buried 6 feet into the earth. I have no clue why. I'm super confused. I'm no clue what's going on, no interaction with the real world, and it was really scary. But I had to go through that and experience that depth to be able to get to the divine. And that's kind of like the yin yang. And so I kind of realized that I've been trying to prove that the DMT landscape was real with science, which we'll explore that later. But I realized I didn't have to prove it to anyone. I was really trying to prove it to myself. And I didn't have to look anymore because it was right before me, right on the surface. It was a true direct connection. And it showed me what I mistook my first trip. So this is what I misinterpreted. I am small, but I'm like an itch on my body. An itch on your body is small, but your whole body moves in response to it. And we're small, but the universe moves in response to us. And then I realized what it was trying to show me the first time that I had missed. And then it made a lot more sense.
So each one of us is small, and together we make up a big tapestry, I suppose, that then the universe does respond to that.
Even an individual outside of the collective, even one individual person contains everything that you need. You don't need to look outside of yourself to find the fulfillment that's there to be found. And I had missed that. And everything came back together. It was like a snake that eats its own tail.
Well, right. And it's a very strange experience. It must have been to have that realization, that psychedelic realization that two trips you had separately across time have a strong link to each other, and one and the other and the other and the other, they're really sort of chapters in the same story.
Yes, exactly. They were. And it was really awesome to see, because when you think about the meaning of life, if you really think about it, if the universe didn't have consciousness to experience it, it never really happened. It's like the tree that falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it. No one was there to experience the world. A universe without life is meaningless. A rock can't contain meaning on its own. But you didn't have to exist, and you do. And it's a real miracle that you have this capacity for conscious experience. It's the carrier of all value. And you are that thing. And you become a lot more grateful, I think, when you realize that. And you become very appreciative that you have this opportunity to exist in a world that could have been dark, but you are the light in it.
This is what is missing, Isaac. This is what is missing in our culture right now. Our culture doesn't have anything like this. And if we do, even if you find established belief systems, unless you're going to something that's very, very, very old and ancient and going to its truest form, unless you're doing that, then it's commercialized and also still empty. And this, what you're talking about, this is real. This is a real connection found within yourself. That once you saw that, once you touched that, it sounds like it was sort of a permanent shift within you, and you were never the same. Were you never been the same from that?
Oh yeah, I used to suffer from nihilism, which I kind of touched on earlier. It's a philosophy that life is meaningless. Mm-hmm. Meaning has been incorporated into my very DNA. I can't forget it. When you see and experience the meaning of life, you're never going to lose that, because the idea that life is meaningless is an illusion, and it's a powerful one. But when you break through, it can never take you back again. And so I think that's where the real power of psychedelics come into play. And it doesn't matter if the inner landscape is real. I think it's real. I think that there's evidence to support that. But even if it's all subjective and produced by the brain, it doesn't matter. You still see this capacity for meaning that you have, and you never let go of it. And then you try to show others how to experience it as well.
Well, and I guess that's why they established churches for this sort of thing. That's why the Navajo, they have their teepee ceremonies. I mean, the teepee ceremony is all about the peyote. They call it the medicine. Grandpa, the medicine is what they refer to it as. And any problems that they have in their lives, they consult the medicine. They consult the ceremony. And I have experienced this. It wasn't that intense of a psychedelic trip, but the magic experienced within the teepee was incredibly profound. And they've been doing this for, nobody even knows how long they've been doing this. The ceremony, the ritual is well established, which tells me that this is a long-standing tradition, and we should be asking why. Why do these cultures have these long-standing traditions that seem to go against the grain of industrial civilization? It's very, very interesting. We gotta take another break, but when we come back, you were saying you wanted to talk about the research.
Yes.
You were saying you wanted to talk about the inner landscape and proving the DMT landscape is real with science. We can get into any or all of those things when we come back from the break, Isaac. This is really fascinating to me. And I think here's a really good song, right? We're just going to go crazy on everybody tonight. Wow. Well, let us open the doors to perception, as they say, in this tumultuous time. Once upon a time I heard a wise man say that ayahuasca is like 10 or 20 years of therapy in one night. We'll talk about all of this with our guest tonight, Isaac Lindenberger. A refreshing conversation. I've been really hankering for a conversation just like this for quite a while now, and it's funny how they talk about the mind-created reality. And this show just tends to make a little girl's dream come true sometimes. We'll be right back. I'm Heather Wade.
We still have time, we might still get by. Every time I think about it, I want to cry. With bombs and the devil, and the kids keep coming. The way to be easy, no time to be young.
Well, somewhere out there, Art Bell, Timothy Leary, and Terrence McKenna are smiling down upon us. I can just feel it out there in the morphogenic field. Oh my goodness, welcome back, Isaac. So the research you were talking about, you wanted to get into the research. So you have this experience, which is an organic thing, an organic, genuine experience within, and then that leads you to scientific research. Where does that take you?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So I had these experiences, and the amazing thing is this landscape, it's not empty. It is inhabited by autonomous entities. There are real beings there. As Terrence McKenna calls them, he calls them machine elves. And if they can be contacted reliably, I say, let us see what they have to say.
Oh, I'm with you. Yes, absolutely, yes. I've had a theory for the better part of my life that the psychedelics are not just a drug. These are the keys to that other world, key to that other spirit world. We get to, it pulls back the curtain. We get to really touch it, feel it, immerse ourselves in it, when we choose to take that leap, to experience something like this. And, you know, as I was saying, the Navajo refer to peyote as the medicine, as grandpa. And when they do that, they're talking about that the medicine has its own personality, its own soul. They'll say things like, well, the medicine doesn't want you to do that, or the medicine is telling you to do this, or the medicine is blessing you now. I mean, they speak about it as if it is an entity itself. And I've heard people talk about psilocybin mushrooms, you know, your magic teachers and, golden teachers and this sort of a thing. They talk about that as having a spirit. The mushroom wants you to do this. The mushroom wants you to do that. So if the psychedelic substance itself has a personality, a soul to it, a life to it, and then it opens the door to a realm teeming with life, then why is this seen as so bad? Why is it taboo? Why are we not supposed to do this? Why, when people do it, you were talking about the stigma, why, when people do it, first of all, we look at psychedelics as a little bit dangerous, and it is certainly not very encouraged, at least in the past, has not been very well encouraged for, you know, the so-called straight person. There's this incredible world awaiting us, Isaac. Why do they not want us to go there? Is it dangerous? Is it as dangerous as we've been told?
Absolutely not. And that's part of the reason why I want to do the research, because if we can prove some tangibility to this realm, the restrictions on it almost have to lift. So my interest is proving the value of DMT as a real connection to another landscape. And if it's anything, it's DMT. Because DMT, it's the only psychedelic produced in the human body. There's no other psychedelics. And not only is DMT produced in humans, it's also potentially in all life, because it's derived from the essential amino acid tryptophan. And amino acids build proteins, so they're in everything that's alive. And so DMT is also an analog to serotonin. So it really plays a key role in perception. So there's a lot of myths about DMT in the culture. One of them is that it's released during death and before birth. And that's not actually true. DMT does not cause a near-death experience. And that's actually a good thing. And that's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around, but we'll get into that in a second. But it's interesting because Descartes pointed out in the 17th century that the pineal gland was the seat of the soul. And DMT might be produced in the pineal gland. Some of Rick Strassman's research supports that idea. And interestingly, the Tibetan Book of the Dead has said that the soul enters the body at 4 weeks, and the pineal gland forms after a month in embryonic development. So this is ancient wisdom being confirmed by modern science.
Wow. God,
Yeah,
you
it's
have
pretty
my
crazy.
You have my attention now. Wow. So, okay, did you keep going with your research when you started to find out that? Where'd you go next?
So that's why I got in contact with Rick Strassman, because
Uh-huh.
Rick Strassman is he's the researcher on DMT. He's the one who started all of this in the 90s. It was the first DMT research in 30 years. And what Rick Strassman expected was these people would come back from DMT and they would understand it was a hallucination. But they came back and they said that wasn't a hallucination. That was the most real thing I've ever seen. And it freaked him out a little bit. He was like, what? Like, I did not see that coming. And, he did work on DMT being produced in the pineal gland. Now, we don't have proof that DMT is produced in the pineal gland, but we do have proof it's produced in the lungs. It's actually the main source of it in the body, which makes sense because if you think about it, when you focus on your breathing for meditation, that can unlock a transcendent state. And if DMT is produced in the lungs, that really makes a lot more sense.
Wow. Gosh, and here every time somebody tells me now, come on, take a deep breath, and I think they're full of it. They're not full of it.
Yeah, they might be activating that DMT spike in your body. So it's interesting to think about where it's from and what it does in the body. But the most interesting thing I think about DMT in the body is how similar it is to near-death experiences. So this is the main part of my conversation with Rick Strassman that I think is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Near-death experiences are a lot like DMT. You leave your body, you go to another realm, you experience these entities that you communicate with, that you can come back with knowledge from. It's very, very similar. So if you think about it, if DMT caused near-death experiences, that wouldn't be that insane that they're similar, that they're caused by the same mechanism of action in the brain. But near-death experiences are actually caused by glutamate reuptake, asphyxiation, and kappa opioid receptor stimulation. So it turns out that near-death experiences are caused by a different mechanism, but they lead to the same effect. So since it's different ways of activating the same effect, it's more evidence that the landscape is actually objectively real. It's more evidence that it's actually taking you somewhere real. Because if both were caused by DMT, that's nothing special. They're caused by different things, and they take you to the same place, and that's what's crazy.
Then that place is real. Okay, now I understand what you were saying. You wanted to prove the DMT landscape is real with scientific research. And I can tell you, I have had a near-death experience, October 9, 2009, and whatever happened to me, Isaac, was very real. I can take my mind back if I were to do that, close my eyes and go back, and I can go back to that place. And there was an entity there. There was something there. I couldn't tell you what it was or who it was. It was definitely a male presence, and I was communicating, talking with this male presence. Very chill personality, very warm, very loving, and very kind, very laid back. And it was a real surprise to me. And
Yeah.
I come back never the same. I have never, ever been the same since then. And I came back with a few directives, if you will. And one of those directives, the main principal one, was, okay, what is life all about? I asked this over and over. What is life all about? What is the purpose? What is the point? Because, just like every near-death experience, you're told you have to go back, da-da-da. So when I'm being told that, I'm saying, why? Why should I have to go back? If I blinked out right now, just let me stay here, because nobody's going to miss me. It won't change the world one bit if I were to go. And as it was explained to me in this other place, it was the life is all about the interaction of souls, Isaac. The way we interact with each other, the way we leave each other when that interaction is over with, is the only thing that is taken with us when we cross over to that other world. And this is the thing that matters. And it was explained to me by I don't know who or what, that it's not just in our interactions with other human souls, our interaction with other animals, our interactions with all of life. So that was, my near-death trip. Does that parallel any of your DMT trips?
That is what I'm talking about. That is amazing. Yes, it's perfectly correlated. Yeah, you can think about it by analogy of aliens. Let's say we take 3 aliens and we put one in London, one in India, and one in Canada, and then they go back up to their spaceship. They might not think they were all on the same planet, right? Because they were in different countries, but they might be able to notice, well, there was one atmosphere, there was human beings, even though we were in different locations, it's probably true we were all on the same planet. We were in the same place. So it's the same with DMT and near-death experiences. They're so similar and consistent that even though the trips vary a little bit, it's probably evidence that you're reporting back from the same location through the consistencies.
Interesting. Well, okay, so how often have you had the opportunity to go to that other place, to have a DMT trip? And what are these entities, what are their messages that you've gotten so far?
Well, I would say ayahuasca was the most powerful catalyst for being able to communicate with entities.
Mm-hmm.
And so through interacting with them, I've thought about a way to use the communication to prove they exist. So this is the real experiment. So far, we've just listed evidence that the realm could be real objectively.
Mm.
Here's the real test. We use the machine elves for this. You send someone to the DMT hyperspace and you find a being, and let's say you tell it a number like 23. Then you send someone else and ask what that number was. And if both people come back with the same number, you would verify the objectivity of that inner landscape.
Oh, how clever.
Yeah. So it's a crazy idea to be able to do this. And it's funny. I was talking to my professor about this and he said, "Why'd you pick the number 23? I said, "I don't know. It was random." He was like, "Well, the book I just recommended you," he had recommended me a book 20 minutes before I said that. 23 is actually the portal into the divine realm in the book I just told you about. And I was like, what the heck, dude? That's too synchronistic for my brain to handle right now.
Well, that is the nature of psychedelics also, is that they do tend to bring out the synchronicities. And there's a lot of, whoa, no way, that goes on. If you're really doing it right, at least.
Yeah, that's the truth. And this is interesting. I told my friend about this idea, and she has had thousands of DMT experiences, which is about 900 more than I've had. And she is the most serious psychonaut I've ever met in my life. And she told me she has a song that was given to her by the entities that she can use to summon them. This woman took the song and put it on Spotify, and it's on a Psytrance album, and it was literally from the entities. I mean, it doesn't get cooler than that.
Wow. Oh, and I thought Tulku was cool. You gotta tell us where to find this, or send me a link or something.
I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I'll look for it during the next commercial break. And she told me that instead of giving them a number, that's our language. Let's use their language and communicate in song. And so she's going to help me run this experiment where we talk to the DMT elves in their own language, communicate to them and get the same message back. And then that would change the world. If we proved another dimension exists with science, it would be the most revolutionary discovery in all of mankind.
Well,
and that's what we're working on.
Who needs the Large Hadron Collider?
Exactly. It's also much cheaper to research this. That's for sure.
Wow, God, wow. Well, okay, so do these entities enjoy interacting with us?
They seek us out when we go to the landscape. So they communicate to us through telepathy. And it is like a song, and it's like this song of love, though. It's like this energy that they're channeling to you. And if you're a real experienced psychonaut, you can repeat it back to them. And so that's why I thought her idea was just genius. I'm really lucky to have her on my team. And an interesting thing about that is there are two main criticisms to the idea that DMT and near-death experiences are objective. And both of those can be countered well. The one by James Kant is similar to this. He went to the DMT realm, and he experienced an interaction with an entity, and he made it go away. He looked at it, and he made it go away. And he was like, oh, look, I control this landscape. I made the entity go away. It's clearly not real. This is all just a hallucination in my mind. However, Danielle pointed out, we can summon the beings with a song they gave us, and if you're directing all that negative energy at them, they're gonna go away. They're gonna be like, screw you, dude. So his criticism is just proof that he knows how to make them not want to be around his energy. Like, it's not proof of any objectivity. It's especially true when you think about the fact you can summon them consistently with their own songs. So I thought that played into that interestingly.
Well, yeah, but I'm very curious to know what you mean exactly by summon them. So you play the song, and what happens?
Well, you don't play the song in real life. So what Danielle would do is or what my friend would do is she would go to the landscape, and she would sing this song, and in the landscape, they would appear. And she told me that it's not just beings that appear, it's the same beings that gave her the song that are consistently appearing with this mechanism of summoning. So that's additional evidence that they're objectively real.
Well, who are these beings? Have they ever been human? Do they talk about who they are? Or do they just live in this other dimension? They clearly enjoy interacting with humans. So, I just have so many questions about who these beings are. Are they spirits? Are they extraterrestrials? Are they souls, human souls that are out of their bodies? Do we know who they are? What they are?
There is actually an anthology of categorization between the different beings that exist in the dimensional hyperspace. And there are different beings for different energies. So there are beings that are other human souls that are currently experiencing a psychedelic. There are beings that exist within the dimension themselves and they don't leave. There's a variety of them, and it's unclear for sure. This is based on different reports collected from different psychedelic experiences. But Andrew Gallimore is researching this more in depth. He's doing extended state DMT studies where he's injecting people with DMT intravenously for 4 hours straight so that they can map the hyperspace and explore it in depth.
Wow. Now, does that have any detrimental effects on the person experiencing that for 4 hours? Because I thought, it's the old businessman's trip where you do it. It's about 5 or 10 minutes, and then you come back and you go back to your life. 4 hours.
Well, that's how long ayahuasca lasts. So it seems like we can handle it. I would sign up for it personally. It definitely sounds interesting, and it's interesting because they're trying to map it out. And I heard someone say, "Well, what if they copyright it?" What? You're not gonna copyright a dimension? Come on. I guess that's peak capitalism.
Well, I know, right, and good term there, peak capitalism. And it's a spiritual dimension, so it would seem to be outside of that. I would really be interested to know if we told the entities, they're trying to map your world here, and then they're going to copyright it. I wonder what they would say. They would probably laugh so hard and go, "Gosh, you guys have completely missed the point."
Yeah, tell me about it. Man, that's funny. Yeah, maybe we should just not let them know for now. I don't want to keep any secrets from them, but we're friends. But I feel like that is really funny.
I'm really intrigued by this idea that they speak in music. Because there's something universal about music. You play something really good, and it moves people, and that is universal. Music has it's a real shortcut to the spirit and to the soul. When I'm having a hard time in life, I often change my trajectory with music, and I can do that in any number of ways. And my music tastes are all over the place, from Typo Negative to the world music to disco to hair metal to classic rock, Fleetwood Mac. It's just all over the place because I like whatever's good. And you can change your spirit with music, and this is what the beings speak in. I've done shows with people, particularly Alexander Tanis, and he talks about how sound affects our consciousness a great deal, and how we can manipulate our consciousness just through sound. And so you see how we're always dancing around this idea of consciousness, and all roads tend to lead to consciousness, and it would appear that the beings are all about the consciousness. So what do they want? Do they want us to understand a certain set of ideas? Do they want us to return to more humanitarian values? What do they want for us?
Based off of my experiences, I think it's just really simple. I think they want us to take the knowledge of the inner landscape and seeing that meaning of life and use it to be a better person and use it to improve human well-being, improve your own life, and improve the life of others around you. Because by making other people's life better, you make your own better. It's the ultimate source of a fulfilled life is altruism. I mean, if you really want to be the most selfish person in the world, you're going to be the nicest to other people and you're just going to be awesome to others. And I think psychedelics really show you that, especially when you communicate with the entities, because you see, wow, life does mean something no matter what. It means something no matter what metaphysical truth is correct. My life has value. It's important. And so is the life of others. And when you see that in yourself, you can see it in people around you, and you start to care about them more, and you start to just be a better person because you see the value that's there to be found, and you really appreciate it, and you become a better parent, a better lover, and just it just makes you more integrated into the world in a way that if everybody experienced, I think it would just be a much better place. Not to say it isn't amazing now, but there's always room for improvement.
Oh, there sure is. There sure is. And this, my friends out there in the night, is coming from a former nihilist. Now that has got to speak volumes. Wow. Well, and again, there's so much to talk about on the subject. Another break here we got to take, Isaac. And I'm just going to sort of absorb everything that you've told me so far, and we'll just see where the conversation rolls to when we come back. Berger is here with us tonight. If you're tuning in just a little bit late, you have found yourself in the middle of a very interesting conversation about this psychedelic shift. There are more and more and more people getting into this now. I mean, there are software developers that microdose. As we were talking about earlier, the FDA has approved psilocybin mushrooms as a treatment for depression. Also, ketamine has some promise for treatment for depression and PTSD, these type of disorders. And so this is quickly emerging and taking a foothold in our civilization, in our culture, in our society. And we ought to take note of that. And of course, indigenous cultures that have been doing this sort of thing for a long, long time. A long time. And we should look at that and this entire phenomenon. Welcome back, Isaac. So if you were to be successful and you were to prove that the DMT landscape is a real place, through scientific evidence and the scientific method, how would that change our perception of DMT and psychedelics, and how would that change science?
Well, I think it would change everything. We would now have a portal within the inner landscape to go into another world, and that we see that we're intrinsically connected to. And at that point, I don't think psychedelics, the ban on them would be able to last much longer, because you just see the value right there. I don't think the ban's going to last very long anyway, considering the research on psychedelics for depression and PTSD and even opiate addiction. It's really amazing. So I think it would help with that, but I also think it would show people that there's something within that's there to be found. And I think people would start looking, and I think it would lead to a revolution of human consciousness that would change the world, because like I said earlier, the external reflects the internal. And if the inner landscape collectively experiences this vast transformation of the mind, then we're going to see a much different world. And I think it would be a much better one, because you would have the ability to see the value that's within every person because you see it in yourself. And I think that's something that we really need.
Well, can we give this DMT to the major news networks? Can we do that? I think that would be a good start. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't you love to see Tucker Carlson having a trip on his program? I'd love to see that.
I would love to see that. Someone interestingly a famous celebrity recently had a DMT experience. It was Mike Tyson. And
Oh,
now he is
wow.
completely different. That guy had one of the biggest egos in the world. And now he's like spiritual and stuff. It's pretty insane, honestly.
Oh, that's a trip. That is something else. Wow. Well, I think if you know, our people in charge, you know, those in the suits in the House and the Senate, I'll even go that far. If they all had somebody distributed mushrooms or something to everybody in the House and the Senate, of course we'd have to go, 5 to 10 minutes of them being appalled at the idea. And oh no, I can't do something like that. No, I never. Well, you never, and that's why you should. And I think we'd have a completely different country. I really think we would.
I think so too.
Because you're talking about what this does. It opens up that window. It opens up the door to valuing life and love. And what I see, and I often talk about this with producer Tony, it really greatly concerns me because I look around and I see the fight between the sort of right and the left. And look, I feel that the left has very valid arguments. I feel the right has some valid arguments as well. But we're so at odds with each other. And the problem is, we're starting to think of it as us and them is the other. And when you start down that path of thinking, that way of thinking, then you start to devalue the other. And this is a real slippery slope to just punching somebody in the face at the grocery store, and this isn't going to help us. Do you see the devaluing going on around us, Isaac?
Yeah, you can really see it everywhere. And it happens, like you said, when you have a mentality of us versus them instead of all of us together.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to dream about, I never did this, just to clarify, but flooding my town's water system with DMT or LSD and seeing the awakening. Now, to be fair, some people might be going for a drive or something, so not recommended to do something like this, but I used to fantasize about this kind of collective awakening, which it would need to happen voluntarily, of course, because people have to know what they're getting themselves into and expect it. That way they can prepare. But the way to do that is to legalize these substances and make them available to people. And I think that's coming sooner than later. Thankfully, it's happening in the medical field. So it's kind of like cannabis. First, it's legal for medicine, then it's legal recreationally. I think we're going to see the same thing with psychedelics.
Well, wouldn't it be fun to have psychedelic bars that you go to, or session houses or something that you would go to, and you pay a little cover charge or something, and you go in and have your trip. I mean, it may sound flippant to say something like that, but what I'm getting at here is we have a mental health crisis in this country and around the world. The number one mental health issue around our beautiful planet Earth is depression and anxiety. And why is that? There's got to be a root cause. That doesn't just happen for no reason. We're out of touch with something very important. And, I wonder to myself, because I'm not a doctor, what do I know? I don't want to drive anybody more crazy, but could this maybe be a solution to the worldwide depression issue that we have? You know what I think about a lot is I love that movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. And for people who haven't seen it, I'm about to ruin it for you because at the end, they do dose the water supply for a military base out in the desert, and the entire military base starts having a trip. And you see these soldiers that have probably never done this before, and they're picking up bugs and flowers and going, wow. And they're driving tanks around and laughing, and everything is just sort of, all the rules are going out the window, and everybody's having an interesting time. And they do realize the value of life. because they let all the goats free, the debleeded goats. They let them all free. And the hostages, the Middle Eastern hostages that they have held in the cells at the military base, they just let them all go. Hey, go, run, be free. And this is all happening in the middle of their LSD trip. And it's a funny example. But what we're going through in the world right now, Isaac, is not funny at all. And now we're in the middle of a global pandemic where the death count is just rising every day. It's a very disconcerting thing to see happen. And so if we thought we had a mental health crisis before, look out. So,
Yeah.
would psychedelics, would DMT or mushrooms or ayahuasca or any other, there's research chemicals out there, there's alpha-methyltryptamine out there also, many others that people try. Would that be something we ought to try? Because it hasn't quite hit yet, but it is bubbling up and it's about to. And if we had shooters before and we had problems before, look out. I am not looking forward to this mental health fallout that is about to hit us, Isaac.
Yeah, well, I definitely think it would help. Psychedelics are one of the only tools that can efficiently treat treatment-resistant depression about 80% of the time. That was John Hopkins' research on psilocybin. And that would happen collectively, too. Now, I don't think they're a panacea. I don't think they would solve all our problems, but I certainly think they would solve some of them. And I think it's definitely worth exploring. I mean, I personally believe if psychedelics were legal and people had access to them, it would knock out most of the depression in the world over some time, after they have time to be implemented into society properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're the sacred medicine that would cure this collective ailment.
Well, it seems to me the vision quest, if you go back to Native Americans, the vision quest was something that they would do when a person reaches an impasse in their lives. And we are all about to reach an impasse in our lives if we haven't already. And maybe this is just a quicker way to a very powerful vision, a vision quest of sorts.
Yeah, it is a vision quest, and it's something that I think most people should experience. Dying without ever having a psychedelic experience is like dying without ever having sex. You don't experience the full capacity of your human existence and how it can interact with the world. You don't see the full potential that's there to be found. And to be fair, it can be taken to extreme. There's an example from, I think it was Alan Watts. He said, if a biologist finds something in a microscope that's valuable, they don't keep staring into the microscope. They take it to the lab. And so, in the same way, when you see something that's valuable on psychedelics, you don't have to continue tripping every day. You don't want it to be like a crutch. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with tripping every month or once a year. I mean, I don't want to set any limits on it, but, there's a certain balance there that is important to find. And you can integrate it into your life without needing it anymore. Not to say you should never trip again, though.
Well, that actually is an interesting thing about most psychedelics is that they have a built-in regulatory system, if you will, because if you take mushrooms on a weekend and you say Friday night you got off of work and you want to have a wild weekend and you get your friends together and everybody has some mushrooms, and then Saturday, if you want to do that again, you can take that same amount of mushrooms and you won't really have the full-blown trip. And the same thing with LSD. Now, I don't know about ayahuasca or DMT. It might be similar, but this is not a drug that you kind of get addicted to and do every day. You can have one trip and that trip will affect your life for the next 20 years.
Exactly. And psychedelics, you're right, they don't cause addiction, they cure it. Opiate addiction, 90% success rate compared to rehab, which is like 15%. So they actually do the opposite. They cure addictive capacities by showing you some of the truths that they have to offer. And mushrooms specifically are a really interesting one. Mushrooms are the only psilocybin mushrooms. They're the only 4-methoxylated molecule in the world. And Terence McKenna said this really well. if an alien species were to make a communication device to try to find life in the rest of the galaxy, they would make one that you can phone home with. And mushrooms replicate extremely fast. They're very powerful. And so he says that mushrooms are like an ET phone home, where you take them and they consciously communicate with these extraterrestrial beings or interdimensional beings. And since their blueprint is unique, we don't find the 4-methoxylated molecule anywhere in nature. It would make sense to pitch mushrooms as this. And if you think about the mycelium floor grid, where mushrooms are in the floor, they help trees connect with their other family of trees. So a mother tree will send more nutrients to its child, and there's actually a family preference there. They communicate with each other. And so psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, which is an analog to DMT and serotonin, they are like the spiritual neural connection of the galaxy. They connect the whole spiritual universe, and you experience that on a sufficiently large dose.
Well, we should then talk about this. Okay, so it's a dark time that we're in, and we'll bring it down to the individual level. So let's say a person is having a hard time. They're just, maybe a string of bad things have happened in their life, and they are maybe listening to you and I, or maybe they had this thought on their own before you and I got on to talk about it. Maybe they listened to your show and they're thinking about doing this, but they don't know how, Isaac. And so in a sort of depressed or sort of negative hurt mindset, how would a person have their best trip, do you think?
I think the best psychedelic experiences are with someone you trust. So you want to have someone who's like a trip sitter who's sober. Just in case, anything happens that you're not ready for, they can comfort you. And you want to do a research into the thing you have, make sure it's safe, make sure it's pure, of course. And I would say listening to Alan Watts is a really great thing to do during a psychedelic experience, because he shows you the enchanted nature of experience. Or you could do the Terence McKenna thing where you put a blindfold on and experience it in darkness, and that's something else beneficial. Or you could meditate or listen to music that you personally find relaxing. Just making sure you're comfortable, because psychedelics, the experience is all about set and setting. The set is your physical environment, and the setting is your mental space. And so you can be depressed and take a psychedelic, but you want to have a positive attitude towards the psychedelic, of course, and believe truly with intention that this experience can better your life, and try to make it to where you look for the things that are to be found that will make your life better. And I think if you look for it, you will find it.
Should a person be careful about the music they listen to, the movies they watch, the TV that they watch? Should they turn the TV off before they do this?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend TV. I think or movies. I think if you could go outside, that's nice. Helps if you're in an area where it's legal, like Denver. But it's really better to like have just a relaxed environment where, hopefully heavy metal doesn't relax you. I guess that could work, but maybe try to find something a little more relaxing, which is why I recommended Alan Watts, because he's got that chill step out there that's really nice to listen to. But just something that makes you feel comfortable and improves your set and setting. And I would recommend looking into set and setting before any psychedelic experience. And if you have a guide there, I think you're really going to be okay. And it's going to benefit you in the long run. And you can see it for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it, because it's right on the surface waiting for you to notice. So I say go look for it.
Go looking for. What if a person is afraid of what this may unlock within them?
I think that there's a fair amount of anxiety around psychedelic experiences, because they are very powerful and you are going into your mind. And to a certain extent, a little bit of concern for your personal well-being is worth having because it serves as a protective factor for being able to benefit from the experience in the long run, unless it's overwhelming. If you are really freaked out, I wouldn't really recommend, maybe it's not the right time. Maybe just a little anxiety is fine. It's normal. It even still happens for me. I'll go into a psychedelic experience and I'll be like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. It's part of what makes it interesting and a little fun, but it's totally natural to feel that. And unless it feels especially overwhelming, I would just know it. I would just know it's a part of the process.
Mm-hmm. All right. So it is a bit of an adventure to leap into this.
Every time.
Even for someone experienced like you, every time. Well, it's the inner adventure, and it's a confusing, scary, interesting, beautiful, mysterious world that we live in. And if this can give us some insight into that, and some insight into how we relate to each other, and if it can be similar to the near-death experience, I did an interview with a gentleman by the name of Roy West, Isaac, and we were not talking about these things at all. We were talking about reverse engineered alien technology. He had seen something really interesting at his job. And we were talking about that all night. And then at the end of the interview, he just brings something up out of the clear blue. He says, I think everybody should have a near-death experience because that would absolutely change the world. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because here was a person very unlikely, and it really struck me when he just came out with that at the end of this interview talking about alien technology all night. We were not on this topic, and he brings that up, and he was so sincere and so confident about what he was saying that it made an impression on me. And here tonight, we're having this entire conversation with you, and it's along similar lines. And so to go back to what Marilyn Hughes talked about, that things happen in the energy before they happen in the tangible reality on the ground. Perhaps this idea of psychedelics is coming from those beings in that dimension, and they're sort of whispering in our ear like an angel whispering in your ear, hey, you're having problems in your world right now. Maybe you want to take some mushrooms. Is maybe that going on with us right now? Because it just seems to be bubbling up, and everybody's kind of like, what do we do? What do we do? All this is really bad. And this idea, everybody's just obsessed with the consciousness, Isaac.
Yeah, psychedelics are taking over the world, and they're doing it for a reason. I think it's part of Gaia, or Mother Earth's, defense mechanism. I think that we're destroying the planet and destroying our inner lives to, the extent of depression and nihilism, to the extent where there's this protective mechanism that's embedded within the earth that's being activated. And that's why ayahuasca and mushrooms and peyote are appearing everywhere. And they're actually calling out to us to use them in a way that enhances our experience and solves the problem in our lives. And I don't think that this is new either. I think they've been with us since the start, and that is the stoned ape theory from Terence McKenna, which the stoned ape theory says that psychedelics helped evolve our consciousness. When we were primates, we ate mushrooms, and they evolved our minds to be able to think like we do. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't actually Terence McKenna who coined this term, who coined the idea. It was actually Aldous Huxley who wrote The Doors of Perception. Mm-hmm. He called it neurotheology. And it's the idea that psychedelics are the reason we evolved to this point in the first place. So if they're so historic that they helped us get to where we are now, this is where they come to play for the next phase of our evolution, where first they helped us evolve into intelligent, conscious beings. Now they're helping us get around the impediments to success that we're experiencing collectively as a species.
Well, that is pretty heavy, and that is pretty dense right there, and I think it makes sense to me when I hear you talk about that. And I used to listen to Terrence McKenna, and everything he said made a lot of sense. There are a couple things he said didn't much make any sense, but maybe because I was listening to him sober. You know, maybe you need to listen to Terrence McKenna while you're tripping to make a lot more sense to you, maybe.
It does. Yeah. He's another good one to listen to.
Oh, he is. Sometimes I listen to him just for fun when I'm, out in the yard, working in the yard. It's such a great stimulation to the mind. And by the way, so are you, Isaac. Really interesting night tonight, and it's coming on time where we ought to open up the phone lines. What questions do you guys have out there? And by the way, anybody out there had a psychedelic trip? I know there's some of you out there. You want to call up and talk about what happened to you in your trip? Hey, your operator here is standing by. I'm ready to take your call, and we can talk about these things. I don't have anybody telling me what I can and can't talk about on the show. We don't have corporate sponsors telling us what we can and cannot do. Let's let it rip, you guys. As long as the language is clean, you can go ahead and call up the show and tell us what you found if you went through those doors of perception. I'm Heather Wade. We'll be right back.
But just the same, my head is spinning. She's got a way to keep me on her side. It's just a ride. It's never ending.
Oh, those phone lines are open. I want to talk to you out there. Of course, I have more questions for our guest tonight, Isaac Lindenberger. So easy to talk to him. Such a laid-back, cool conversation. Exactly the type of show I like to do. Exactly the type of guest I enjoy conversating with. That's a word. And so now, look, it just won't be the same if you don't call. We've got to get that going. I sure would love to hear what your guys' response is to all of this madness that we're talking about here tonight. And I know it's a little unconventional, but as Isaac Lindenberger has pointed out to us, it's becoming more and more accepted, more and more normal. And so I would love to hear your reactions. If you have never experienced psychedelics, you call up and tell me what you think. I'm sure you think something. Don't be shy. I know it can be a little nerve-wracking to get on a live radio program. I certainly know about that. But it's a lot of fun. And, it just is not the same show until we start taking calls, until we start talking to you guys. So I'm looking forward to your response to all of this. And welcome back, Isaac. I do have some response here in my looking glass. You want to hear this? This is actually pretty good. I don't know. I should probably tell you what the looking glass is. It's a way. Did you ever listen to Art Bell?
No, but I'm assuming you have it's like a crystal ball that people can telepathically communicate to you with. Is that right?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. There's a lot of quantum physics involved and things like that, but really, no. So Art Bell on the old Coast to Coast AM, he had a thing that was called Fast Blast. And this was a way for the listeners to send him their response, their comments and questions and whatnot as he's doing the live show. And nowadays we call it the looking glass. I don't really make that clear very often, and I probably should. So this is what I have here from some of the listeners out there. Deanna in Jamestown says, I'm loving the conversation with Isaac. What came to my mind regarding the meaning of life is spiritual reciprocity. I believe we've forgotten we're emotionally connected, desperately needing each other. I'm thoroughly convinced all paths lead to love, and thanks for everything, Heather. Well, that's a pretty glowing response to what we're talking about tonight, Isaac.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds like she's seen some of the truth to be found here as well. And it doesn't really need to be found with psychedelics. They just are so remarkably reliable at finding it. Forms of meditation can help you find it too. And I think you see more of the value in meditation after having a psychedelic experience. I know I did. I tried meditation before ever having a psychedelic, and I thought, that's a little weird, but I don't really see the point. I'm just closing my eyes and thinking. And after experiencing psychedelics, I saw that there was something there to be found. And you can keep it with you, even when you don't have any mushrooms in your closet.
Well, and that's the thing that I used to hear Terrence McKenna talk about with Art on the Air. God, I remember those shows. And he would say, look, these are not drugs of addiction. You do it one time, and then you unpack that experience for years afterwards sometimes. Now, some people, if they have readily available access to these things, they may do this every weekend or every month, or some people, once a year, twice a year, this sort of a thing to reset the mind. They may do it that way. But these are not drugs of addiction. And what's really interesting is because that is a major parallel to the spiritual vision quest of the Native Americans. Because to them, you have your vision quest, okay, but you don't always get your immediate answers from the vision quest. You go out, you have your experience, and then you come back from that, and you spend quite a bit of time after that unfolding, unpacking everything, all the density of that experience. And that is how they used to deal with times like we're in right now. We're collectively in this great impasse. And how are we going to deal with that? I just thought I'd explore this idea that maybe, because if people listen to this, they're probably going to think I'm telling them go out and have a trip. And that isn't what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, look at this, what a lot of people are out there doing. And, if what you are saying, Isaac, is true, that the DMT landscape is a real place, well, perhaps if the near-death experience is a path to that, perhaps the out-of-body experience can be a path to that. Perhaps lucid dreaming can be a path to that. Maybe even alien abduction is a path to that. And however a person gets there is fine by me. Even if you just kick back outside listening to some interesting music and it takes you away to a place of greater spiritual understanding and connection to the earth and an understanding of the unseen world around us, well then I'm all for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you brought up alien abductions. It's in Rick Strassman's book. He thinks that not all, but some alien abductions might be natural releases of DMT from the brain or the lungs. And they're very similar. And there's actually some evidence of this. So, you know how on Ancient Aliens, they explore places where there are cave drawings that look like aliens had came to that cave? They're just real mysterious beings and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, the petroglyphs, yeah.
Yeah, there's some examples where in those areas, there's a higher amount of natural psychedelic plants. And so it's possible that they had actually taken psychedelics and the beings weren't hallucinatory beings. They were actually extra-dimensional beings that could communicate through consciousness, and that also doesn't mean they couldn't physically travel as well. If an interdimensional being has the capacity to telepathically communicate with you on a psychedelic, it might have the technology and capability to come to this physical landscape itself. So there's an interesting parallel to be drawn there.
Oh, there certainly is. And let me blow your mind. You've been blowing my mind all night. Let me just blow your mind here a little bit. I have government documentation that talks about one of the most common extraterrestrials out there to be found, because apparently there are 4, according to our government, that they know about. And one of those is what they call transmorphic entities that exist outside of space and time.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, we'll talk about that in a second. We got us a call here, so let's see what's on the mind of the folks out there. If you're up for taking a call, what do you say, Isaac?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, don't let me forget, though, the document. I got something in there I want you to hear. On the phone, you're on the air with Isaac Lindenberger. Welcome to the show.
Hello, y'all.
Well, good morning.
Bring back the old times. I think the thing that I learned that was most interesting or important to me was that when you think and everything, you see the world and everything, and you think that it's real and all that. But when you have an experience like we're talking about, you realize that everything is all made up in your mind and condensed in your mind and filtered in your mind, and it's all basically made up. There is no connection with the outside world other than a made-up connection. It's what you see. I mean, every day, whatever it is, what you see.
Really?
Anyway,
A made-up connection. Well, let me ask you, caller, do you think this conversation tonight is steering people in the wrong direction or the right direction? Be honest.
I don't know because I never experienced ayahuasca. Back in the old days, it wasn't really available. So, but it seems like like step one is to realize that what you see is not real, and then with ayahuasca, maybe I don't know. I suspect that maybe it's steering you to how to get through the veil to the other side. I don't know.
Well, if you
Yeah.
don't... Okay, Isaac, go right ahead.
Well, it's interesting to point out that regardless of the reality of existence, of other dimensions, or even our physical reality, you see that you can program your existence to be what you want to be. You see the power that you have as an individual, and you can use that free will to write your own future, because destiny is a book that you write yourself. And regardless of the reality of it, you can make it what you want it to be, and you can make it better. So it's an interesting observation that you brought up.
Yeah, oh, it sure is. And if you don't mind me asking, caller, there's a lot of different psychedelics out there. You haven't given us your name or your location, so, no worries. What have you experienced? Was it LSD? Was it MDMA, alpha-methyltryptamine, psychedelic mushrooms? Do you care to name a substance for us?
Well, it was LSD and mushrooms, and LSD was a little bit gentler. Mushrooms were harsher, but like the problem I always had with it was you'd have this wonderful adventure, and then you'd come back down to earth again, and you'd have to see the world as it, as
Oh,
it normally is. It was tough.
oh, so you didn't like that part coming back from
Yeah.
it. I
If
don't
you
blame
experience
you.
it all the time, it'd be great. But anyway, but then you gotta survive. So
Well, I've heard people describe that other place when you're in the trip. I've heard people describe that as home. Did you experience that, caller?
I wouldn't say really home. I think it was more like toilet bowl cleaner. Clean out everything in your mind that is all messed up and get rid of it.
Well, that is actually fascinating. I know there's some science behind that. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring up or a question for Isaac?
No, I just thought I'd break the ice and get some people out here calling.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I know the night is alive out there. It's just a matter of getting people to break the shyness to call up on the show. Thank you very, very much for the call. I appreciate the call. Isaac, I'm pretty sure you probably know this, and actually, thank you for the call. You may be able to explain it better than I can, but he was talking about, cleaner for the mind. I have been doing some reading about psilocybin mushrooms in particular, that what psilocybin mushrooms can do in relation to the brain. So the brain has established patterns in it, in our lives. We establish certain grooves in our mind, if you will. And then when you take a psychedelic substance, particularly mushrooms, what that does is imagine the mind with a bunch of grooves dug into it. And then psychedelic mushrooms put sort of a new, fresh layer on top of those established grooves in the mind, those established neural pathways in the mind, and it puts a fresh layer over them, a fresh new surface for new neural pathways to be formed, right? Have you read about this?
Yes, it's called neurogenesis. And so psychedelics, more than just psilocybin, psychedelics across the board, they have this capacity to improve the functioning of the brain. And interestingly, what the caller mentioned a common phenomenon where psychedelics, they can be like a slingshot. So they pull you back and they shoot you up into this amazing landscape. And then it slingshots back to where you can actually go a layer below where you were before. But part of that is the experience. Like I said with my ayahuasca experience, I had to go through heaven to get to hell. It's like yin yang. when you realize how to integrate the experience, which is why integration is so important, you can use it to make your life better. And you can appreciate the disruptions in the patterns of life that may occur after in a way that you feel gratitude towards. You have the depths of experience that are possible to feel these things. You can feel sad in a way that can make your life better later because you have that depth, you have that capacity. And I think that can help you get through a period of depression that could potentially follow. Wow, that was so amazing, but life is so mundane. Well, bring what you saw in the psychedelic world and bring it to the world. Bring it into your life and make your life something more with what you saw. And if you can do that, you can empower yourself and you can empower others. And back to the neurochemistry, there's a default mode network in the brain, and it's where the sense of self emanates from. And psychedelics basically turn that off, and your sense of self just kind of dissipates. And that's the main mechanism of action. And it's not to say yourself doesn't exist, but you are the universal forces that lead you to act. Alan Watts is a talk. Do you do it, or does it do you? And it's a great name, and it's so true. You do it because you are it. You're it. The universe does not happen to you. It happens through you. And when you can integrate that conception into your life after the experience, you can really make it worth it. And that's why integration, I think, is so important.
Wow. Well, how exactly is that done? How does one integrate their psychedelic experience into their regular life? Because our caller there, he went to that other place and he enjoyed it there. And then, he didn't much like coming back here to when the trip wears off. So how does one reconcile that? And then how does one integrate what the experience to, this tangible world?
Well, you have to notice what it is you like that you see. And so when you go to the psychedelic landscape and you learn and you see this amazing show, you can hone in on the aspects that make that show worth experiencing. And I think it comes down to consciousness itself. It comes down to being able to have the capacity of consciousness, and that shows you why it's important to improve your own well-being subjectively and improve the well-being of others. Make your life better to make other people's life better. And so it really just boils down to a conceptualization that you have a life that is meaningful. And psychedelics show you that. So it's important not to get too caught up in, man, that was so beautiful there. Notice how it shows you how it's beautiful here. And when you change that frame of thought, I think it becomes easier to integrate what you learned into your life.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm just processing what you're saying, absorbing what you're saying. And, then it seems like that other place, wherever psychedelics take us, is simply an extension of the reality we're experiencing right now.
Yes. And back to what the caller said when he said everything is, let's say you notice everything is, let's say you're convinced the world doesn't exist or life isn't real or something. But think about it like this. When you're watching a movie, technically the movie is happening frame by frame. It's just individual pictures. So if someone leans over to your ear and says, hey, this isn't actually a movie, these are just pictures happening really fast, I'm going to tell them, yo, it's still a good movie. I'm just going to experience it and enjoy it. And I don't need to know. I mean, sure, you can know that it's individual frames and still enjoy the movie. And so psychedelics help you see that. You learn how to enjoy the movie better. And it's important not to get too distracted in the frames and remember that you're a part of the story too.
Yeah, and maybe we overthink things a little bit. Maybe our current civilization, the way things are set up here, maybe we just overanalyze things. There's a great expression, Japanese expression, and it's real simple. It says, no mind. Sometimes there's a little too much mind. And if I learned anything from psychedelics, I learned that sometimes it's exactly that. A little too much mind. No mind can sometimes be very useful. Just act sometimes, just enjoy, just be emotionally affected by what's going on around you. And sometimes that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think this plays back into meditation, because meditation it's training your attention to remember the present moment, to snap back into the existence that you're currently experiencing and to find value in it. Because there is something about the nature of consciousness that you can find peace in at any moment. You don't have to push off your fulfillment into the future, where there's this common thing where I'll be happy once I, get my career going and I graduate college and I have a family, and you finally get there and you're 40 years old and you're like, oh, I'm here. And not really that much is different. You don't look for fulfillment in the future because it's not going to be there. You look for it in the present moment that you're experiencing right now, because that's where it is. That's where meaning is found. And meditation trains you to use your attention to snap back into that. And it is a practice of no thought, because you can be so lost in thought that your daughter is trying to talk to you and you're thinking about your emails. And then you use meditation, you snap back in, you look her in the eyes, and you talk to her. And you experience that relationship to the fullest that you can. And so I totally agree with that.
Interesting. Well, there is a little bit of a lack of seizing the moment in this day and age. And I mean, in, 2020, 2019, 2018, there's a little bit of, cause we want to video everything. We want to take pictures of everything. We're not actually living when you do that. I remember a time where we actually lived our lives and we didn't take pictures of our lunch.
Yeah.
And share it with other people. I think there's something to be said for truly being in the moment. And when you are fully in the moment, there is no procrastination. Things happen now. When you're really in the moment, there's no next weekend, next month. No, we're doing this right now. Why can't we do it just right now? And there's a lot of things I know people listening to us right now, probably tonight, have things maybe on their do list, or things that they wish they could do, things that they want to do, or like you said, as soon as I have fill in the blank, then I will do it and achieve my happiness. And, as they say sometimes, a pretty good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. If psychedelics can inspire us to get up and seize the moment and be in this moment fully, and also have the connection with each other, with the earth around us, start to feel that energy around us, maybe this silly fight between left and right would start to just dissolve. But we're going to have to somehow dose up the talking heads. I don't know how we're going to get that done. But just some thoughts. We got another break. And Isaac, I've got another caller standing by for us on the North American Skype. We'll get to that when we come back from the break. And I'm sure, let me look. Oh yeah, I think there's some more comments and questions in the Looking Glass as well. So, just some thoughts. I really think there's potential here, and I think it's an interesting, fascinating subject that so many people, they're already doing this. And they have been doing this, and there is a shift taking place quietly in our culture. A really wild and interesting trip of a shift that's going on. And so will we embrace that, or will we fight it? What do you guys think? Phone lines are open. I'm ready to take your call. We'll be right back with can't talk. We'll be right back with Isaac Lindenberger. Pardon me. I'm Heather Wade, I think. We'll be right back. It just occurred to me, once in a while I do this without even thinking. It just occurred to me that what I'm asking from all of you just might be a little too personal. Every now and then, I'll do a show on a particular topic, and I will ask people to call up with their experiences or ask them to call and respond to what we're talking about, and it just might be a little too personal. Maybe tonight is one of those nights. It just occurred to me a little how wild it is to just open up the phone lines to the whole world out there and say, hey, call us up and tell us about your psychedelic experiences or what you think about all of this. You may be out there thinking that this is just crazy. You may have had a trip yourself, and maybe you don't want to talk about that in a public forum like this. So, as I say, that just occurred to me here, what I'm asking of you guys, and maybe that's a little bit too much to ask. So I ask your forgiveness for that. Maybe I'm asking something a little too personal. And so if you don't want to call, I understand. And look, if you disagree with us, you are still welcome to call up and disagree. You don't have to agree with me every night. I'm not one of those kind of hosts. You don't have to, if you have a contrary concern, you're more than welcome to call up and voice that. This is why we don't screen the calls around here, because I don't want only the calls that agree with me. That wouldn't be any fun now, would it? So I just wanted to say that before we jump back into the conversation here and do start taking some calls. Welcome back, Isaac. That just occurred to me over the break, what I'm asking from the audience out there. Maybe they've had these experiences and they're highly personal. And so if we don't get a lot of calls tonight, let's just sort of, give the audience a pass on that. What do you say?
Yeah, it totally makes sense, too, considering that psychedelics are not legal in the United States in many places. In some places they are, but not the majority of them. I think that things would be different if in the whole world, if psychedelics were legal. Overall, people don't feel like they have a safe space to talk about their psychedelic experiences. And it's an unfortunate thing to see. I even see that in some of the groups I'm in for psychedelic advocacy. You have people who say, in the group setting, I've never tripped before. And then after, they'll come up to you and say, that was a lie. And it's interesting to experience.
Yeah, we are asking people to call us up and talk about illegal substances. I mean, there's a patchwork in this country right now, but for the most part, this stuff is not exactly legal. And if a person isn't going to use something like a voice changer or something, and they call up and the cat comes out of the bag, so. Yeah, maybe I'm just not thinking sometimes, which is known to happen. But let's go to North American Skype here. You're on the air with Isaac Lindenberger. Welcome to the show. Greetings and hallucinations.
Hi, it's Adrian from Connecticut.
Welcome.
Hi. Isaac, hopefully I can contribute to the conversation without repeating someone else's thoughts or going off topic, because I missed the first 2 hours of tonight's show.
Oh, you missed it. You just missed it.
I did. But I'm not shy. I'm going to try and discuss a few things. When I woke up, the first thing I did was I read the introduction, and within it, it mentions traveling through different dimensions within the mind. You call it one's inner landscape. Mm-hmm. And I think it may even be more than that. And let me try and explain why. I've had minimal psychedelic experiences. One was easy to control. It was very mild. And I was able to turn anything in my vision into what I wanted it to be. And in particular, it was limited to my inner mind. However, I'm wondering if stronger substances open one's mind up to other beings, which can be a natural latent ability. Spirit mediums can do this naturally. Not only are you talking to other entities in your mind, I'm wondering if they are actually able to talk to you in the same way a spirit medium is able to see and talk to spirits from the other realm.
You know, I'm glad you asked that, because that is kind of floating around in my mind. Isaac?
Yes, they do have the capacity to communicate with you. And that's part of what we were talking about earlier, was how to talk to them in a way where we can take back what they say and use the information in a way that's valuable. Because they have something they want to let us know. So I think it's definitely worth listening to. So I think that the point you bring up is accurate. The brain's kind of like a radio, and it can receive these. Traditionally, in the three-dimensional realm, we're receiving the physical world and all that stuff. But you, like you said, you bring a strong psychedelic into the mix. You just amplified that capacity to receive these signals, and this new realm that is always there but normally invisible becomes under observation, and you can interact with it.
Wow, curious. Very curious. Adrian, are you referring to, for me to understand and clarify, are you talking about talking to the dead?
Well, I would say talking to the dead in other realms, which is just other dimensions, is very similar to, and I can only compare this to what I've seen on TV with ayahuasca, claims of talking to guides and other beings, other things they've never seen before.
Okay, all right, okay. Isaac, is that what you were just responding? I mean, are you referring to not just the entities that are over there, but spirit guides and this sort of a thing? Or are they one and the same?
Well, there seems to be a variety in the landscape. So you can interact with a mischievous machine elf like Terence McKenna talks about, or you can experience someone that it appears to be a human spirit that could be guiding you, maybe like a guardian angel in a sense. There are a lot of experiences with guardian angels in the psychedelic literature, and it's something to pay attention to.
Huh. Well, Adrian, does that help you understand? Does that clarify?
Yeah, it does. I had one more question, if you have the time.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Okay. Would you consider anything smokable? You know, marijuana. I've tried opiated hash a long time ago, which was actually pretty wild. Would you consider that in the same category as even, much milder, but what you can get out of ayahuasca, opening yourself up?
Oh, I see. Okay. Isaac, what do you think?
Well, you can smoke DMT. Anytime you can smoke something, there's always the option to vaporize, because vaporization is a little healthier on your lungs. It doesn't produce any smoke, so you don't have any tar deposit. So yeah, DMT is traditionally vaporized, and it leads to a 5-minute effect where you feel like it only lasts 5 minutes, but it can feel like 1,000 years. Time completely dilates, and you live an entirely different life. There's been reports of people who live every life that's ever existed. They shoot a gun and kill someone just as they become the person that just became shot, and then they become everyone that's ever existed in all of infinity, and that happens in 5 minutes in real time. So yes, I would consider some things that you can smoke up there with the power of ayahuasca, especially considering DMT is the ingredient in ayahuasca, and you can just smoke it.
The active ingredient. Well, if a person didn't have access to that and they had access to something maybe a little more mellow, such as maybe marijuana or shatter, wax, keef, this sort of thing, does that still lead to these transformative experiences, you think? Or is that just not enough to push you over the edge?
Well, cannabis isn't going to give you a out-of-body experience particularly strong like DMT will. However, Terence McKenna would say it's good to smoke cannabis once a month or once a week, because then it retains its entheogenic effect. And it's like the first time you ever smoked if you only smoke once a week. Although he did not take his own advice, and I'm pretty sure he smoked every day, but he knew how to do it better than that.
Yeah, on their trip, Terence and Dennis McKenna went down to South America. I think one of the things in their supplies was several kilos of marijuana that they was taking down there with them. And I remember reading True Hallucinations, Terence McKenna's book, and they're sort of floating down the Amazon River on a raft or something, and some indigenous guide is leading them down to the village that has the ayahuasca, and he's just smoking a fat one while he's on this raft just cruising down the river. So yeah, I mean, that was him. So, very, very interesting. All right. And good answer to the question. And thank you, Adrian, very much for the call. Over on the phone here, looks like on a first-time caller line, you are on the air with Isaac Lindenberger. Welcome to the show.
Is that me?
Well, maybe.
Hi.
I'm not too sure. Help us out.
Well, my name's Marty, and I'm in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm calling with a question.
Is this the Marty I think it is?
Yeah, well, it's the one who sent you some tights and some stuff.
Some messages. Well, all right. What a pleasure it is to hear your voice on the show. Well, go right ahead, my friend. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to finally talk to you after all these years, and I really appreciate that. But I'm wondering, is the audio okay?
It's just fine. Just fine. No,
Okay.
we read you, Houston. Just fine.
Yeah, well, I'm using one of those cell phone headsets that are stupid. But anyway.
No, it
Hey.
appears to be working. It appears to be working okay.
Well, excellent, excellent. So I'm a child of the 60s, and my parents were part of a clinical trial with Oscar Janiger doing LSD back in the 60s. And the purpose was to get a fix on what artists, painters, did when they were blazing, I guess you would call it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that any of you are familiar with that fellow, but it sure did something to my parents that changed how I was raised as a kid. And so my question is there a good time for parents to do this kind of experimentation that wouldn't mess around with how they raise their kids? Strange question as it is.
No.
I'm just wondering.
No, I think that's a very good question, actually. And before we hear from Isaac, I'm just curious about you, Marty. Did this affect your upbringing for the better or for the worse?
Well, I think it was for the better because it made particularly my mom, become very interested in the metaphysical, all that stuff. And she kind of took a path along the Theosophical Society line and was very interested in many, many topics of that world. And so she raised me as a kid that could be free and do whatever I wanted, and there was no discipline, there was no any of that. Now I guess that worked to my benefit. I hope it did. I feel like a great person, but I was just curious if it ever goes bad for, kids.
Yeah.
Didn't for me.
It's a relevant and good question. Isaac, what do you think about that?
Well, it's an interesting point to bring up because they're actually starting to roll out psychedelic couples counseling. A friend of mine was just on TV, I think it was NBC, for his treatment with psychedelics for his wife and him. And it made the relationship so strong that now they have their own show together. So it's really cool to see how psychedelics can make connections in your life that previously were unfulfilled, and it can fill those gaps and make them stronger than ever. So I like to believe that psychedelics can make your relationship with your spouse and with your kids even better than ever before, because you see the value in them in a way that sometimes can be easy to miss, unfortunately. And in terms of psychedelics ever going bad, yes, there are trips that people come back from and they don't feel like they've made their lives better. Sometimes, it's rare, but sometimes people feel like it makes their life worse. And I've had an experience myself where I felt like I was going through hell, absolute terror in the experience, but it was required for me to get to heaven. And so I think it depends on how you conceptualize the experience. And if you can view it as a yin-yang, well, I needed to explore this depth to reach this height, I think it can help with integration and help you make the most of it. Because if you focus on the negative, that's what's going to manifest. But if you focus on how you can transmute the negative into something beautiful, then you're going to make that happen as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes perfect sense to me. Absolutely perfect sense to me. And if children are being raised in this, now I would not recommend that parents have a trip in front of their kids. Make sure you're doing this in a space away from the kids. But if it gives them a whole new appreciation for that brand new little soul in the world and what it is to truly guide a new soul in the world, and then they grow up to sound like Marty here, very well adjusted, articulate, intelligent, strong individual. How much is really wrong with that? You know what I mean? We've got, some kids grow up in a rather neglectful situation or abusive situation. And I think psychedelics just might throw a monkey wrench into an abusive situation and change it, into something probably people would not expect. It's a touchy and controversial question. That's why I think I like it that Marty brought that up. That would give for a whole different experience for the children. And if mom suddenly is interested in all things metaphysical, well, then that child or children, if there's multiple children in the household, they are going to get exposed to all this sort of spiritual stuff early in their life, which is going to give them a very unique perspective as they grow up. And I think that I'm trying to poke the holes in it, and I'm sure there's ways to do that. It is drugs after all. But if it's not a drug of addiction, and the results of that are a reduction in abuse, then something to think about, a different approach to think about, a pretty unconventional approach to think about, actually. Thank you very much for the call. First time caller. She's been sending me messages for I just don't know how long. Very cool that she called up. Thank you, Marty, very much for the call and for the very interesting question. We've got another break. I have another call standing by on North American Skype for us, Isaac. And I've got some emails in here. And I do want to tell you about the transmorphic entities that I have in an actual government document. I think you'll find that very interesting. So, there's never enough time on this show. We always think that we have enough time, and then we never do. So, and I got all caught up in the conversation and didn't cue up any music. Here we go. You never really go wrong with a little bit of Crystal Gayle. Speaking of relaxing environments and setting, you can't go wrong with Crystal Gayle. I'm Heather Wade. We'll be right back. Let me grab another call here on the phone, and we'll see what you all have to say about all of this with the time that we have left as we rage through the night from the high desert.
And don't it make my brown eyes blue? I'll be fine when you're gone. I'll just cry all night long.
Once again, we only play the latest hits here in the Kingdom of Nye. Oh, I love my old music. You just have to forgive me for that. Welcome back, Isaac. Yeah, I like the Bee Gees. I do. I'll admit it. They're awesome.
Me too, actually. I sang Staying Alive for the talent show and won, so that was fun.
Wow. Oh, man. Sometime I'll have to send you the MP3 of Ozzy. He did Staying Alive in unique ways.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that is in the bumper catalog, Staying Alive. Actually, because, well, somebody suggested it and it was just perfect. So we've got calls awaiting for us. Let's get to this here. We're going to go to North American Skype. That was the first one that I grabbed. And then we'll go on over to the phone where there's somebody also standing by on North American Skype. You're on the air with Isaac Lindenberger. Welcome to the show.
Can you read me, Houston?
I think you're breaking up. You're breaking up there.
Oh no! I'm gonna burn during re-entry.
Yeah, I know. You might. Well, you know.
Cover.
Well, it sounds like you may be approaching the Earth side of the moon now, caller. I think I know who this is. Is that Bear?
Yeah, you got me. I'm busted.
All right. Well, what's on your mind listening to all this tonight, Bear?
Well, I got something for you after I tell the story, okay?
Okay.
So hang on after I tell the story. Okay, a friend of mine, this is way back when I was a teenager. He took some mushrooms, okay, and he was floating, so he decided there was this maple tree across the street, so he climbed up the maple tree and was just kind of tripping.
Uh-oh.
And he fell out of the maple tree.
Oh, no.
And he turned around and he opened his eyes and he looked at the flowers and he goes, "Wow, man, that was cool, dude." I go, what's going on? And he goes, "I opened my eyes and I looked at the flowers and I smiled at them. They smiled back."
Aww. Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
I hope he didn't break anything. I hope he didn't get injured. No?
He just was like, popped back and he was, normal Jerry. That was his name.
Yeah, well, he did break something. He broke the illusion that the world is not a beautiful place.
Sometimes it'll hurt you.
I was smiling back at him, so something was going right.
Wow. Well, okay, so you said you had something else for it. That's pretty cool, Bear. That is pretty cool. And a reminder that if anybody out there is in the middle of a psychedelic trip, I don't know if it's a good idea to climb anything, trees, buildings, anything like that. So you had something else for us there, Bear?
Yeah, I went up to my place in Sonora Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting. There's like a deck and outside the kitchen. So I went out there and I was like just kind of kicking it for a little bit. And there's a couple turkeys out there, and I was looking and I saw some things bobbing up and down near the two turkeys that I saw, and there were little turkey hatchlings there, and they were just kind of like jumping up and down. They were about the size of a tennis ball. And they were just, it was just kind of relaxing, nature day.
Oh, that's adorable. I don't think I've ever seen a little baby turkey. I bet they're cute.
They are until they get bigger.
Until they get bigger. Well, that's cool. You think you're going
to... when they get bigger.
Well, the dangerous when they get bigger. I am convinced of that. And one day the turkeys are gonna get their revenge. I am fully convinced of that. Well, you think you're gonna enjoy your place when you fully move in up there?
Yeah, it's real nice. I was talking to the neighbor there. She's an 81-year-old lady that lives up there. And, she's, talking and her tailgate got stuck. So I kind of did what I could to help her get her tailgate unstuck. And so it was, kind of like getting to meet some of the people around there.
Well, that's good, and that is something that we all should do, is get to know our neighbors a little bit, even if you're just on a wave across the street basis. I think that's really good, and I'm glad to hear that, Bear. It sounds like a good environment up there, little baby turkeys. Thank you, Bear, for calling in and for the great story. I'm just trying. What a mental image of the man climbing the tree and then he falls out. And I bet everybody hanging out there was like, oh no, wait a minute. And then he has this revelation with the flower. Oh goodness. That is something. Thank you very much for that, Bear. I think that's a story that we needed tonight. And Bear sounds like he's in pretty good spirits. And I'm glad to hear that he's going to be going to a place he can call his own. I lived in Sonora before, and I lived in Jamestown, and most of the places up there do come with a real nice deck. So very, very good. Good to hear. On the phone, we're going to go, and you are on the air with Isaac Lindenberger. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Heather. It's Linda.
Well, good morning.
In Virginia.
Good morning. What's on your mind? Welcome.
I've been listening, and either I know all the wrong people or don't know the right people. I don't know, but I kind of wondered what your guest opinion would be about how many people really use psychedelic drugs to, for an awakening, opted over just escaping what's going on and how crappy the world is.
Well, Isaac?
The primary demographic for psychedelic users is probably young college students. So people who are more open to experimenting with their mind. But psychedelics are permeating all generations, and people are becoming more willing to trust them because they have such a high standard of safety. It's impossible to overdose on LSD and psilocybin. They're actually safer than cannabis, and cannabis is completely safe. But when people see that the danger is over exaggerated, like there's this rumor that you'll jump off a building on acid. That's actually, there's no reports of anyone jumping off of a building on a psychedelic. So that's an interesting rumor. So yeah, people are starting to trust the experience more and learning how to do it in a controlled way that's safe and explore that limit of their mind, especially now that restrictions are being lifted.
Yeah, I've heard of people chasing after the purple nurples that they see in the middle of their trip, but actually in real life, I've never heard of or seen anybody climb up to a building, because the old cliche, right, is that you're going to go on a trip and then you're going to climb up to the top of a building and you're going to say, I'm Superman, I can fly, and then you jump off the building and break something awful. I've never heard or seen that happen in real life. And probably what happened, and maybe Isaac, I don't know what you think about this, but it probably happened one time 40 years ago, and then everybody thought that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I actually think it's made up by the media as a form of propaganda to scare people about the power that psychedelics have, because the 60s were an interesting time. Psychedelics got tied to the movement against the war, and so the government was like, oh no, this isn't good, and so they made up a lot of stuff. Same with cannabis. They made up the documentary they have about how cannabis is going to fry your brain and make you kill your parents. Like they were saying that stuff about weed too. So yeah, they fell into the same camp.
And I've never seen that happen in real life. Now I'm sure every time you say that, somebody out there can come up with one case of something horrible that happened. But we're talking about the majority here, 99% of people who do this. Most of the time when I see somebody use some cannabis, all they're thinking about is, what can I make in the kitchen? with the ingredients that I have. And they usually want to throw together some wild ingredients, or they're terrified of going outside because they don't want anybody to see them, use in the middle of using cannabis. So an interesting question for sure. Linda, you would be surprised how many people, but the thing is, I bet the reason she isn't really exposed to a lot of this is because people tend to do psychedelics in secret, right, Isaac?
Yeah, it's part of the reason why people aren't very open about talking about it is because of the restrictions on psychedelics. So you might be talking to someone and think that they would never use a psychedelic in their life, and the past weekend they had just had a few hits of LSD and went on an inner journey into their inner realm. So it's definitely something that you can be surprised by in terms of who's taken them before.
Oh yeah, and you would be surprised. Sometimes you don't even know it. You may be talking to somebody who's having a trip right then. So all I would say is observe the pupils, and if that looks a little funny, well, you could be talking to someone in the middle of a psychedelic trip, and not really realize it. It's going on a lot more, I think, than people may realize, and it does go on in secret. And it's not exactly, something that you ask somebody when you're hanging out, maybe at the laundromat doing your laundry. By the way, do you have any acid? I'm really looking for some of that right now. It just doesn't come up like that. People are real hush-hush about it. Oh, I'm a businessman. I don't want people to know. Or, I run a daycare. I don't want people to know. Or whatever it is that you do. Most people don't really talk all that much about it. So thank you very much for the call from Linda. Linda, there's an expression in the psychedelic world that when you're ready, it will come to you. So if you think this is something that you are interested in, you can put the thought out there with your mind, hey, maybe I want to go to that world, and start with some meditations, and you never know, it may find its way into your life. So let me see here. Let's go through some of these. Well, actually, there was an email here. I didn't want to miss this. There was an email here from Rowdy who says, I have burnt through all the antidepressants, now going through the gamut of antipsychotics. Nothing is working for me, and I'm getting tired of just trying new script after new script. I'm about to just stop, and well, that is not a pleasant topic. I don't think he is the only person out there going through something like that, Isaac.
No, not at all. It's becoming increasingly more common when you notice the increase in calls to depression call centers right now. 800% increase. It's insane. And I think we need to be quick about finding a remedy to that. And psychedelics are a potential remedy. And there are ways to do psychedelics legally if that's a concern for you. You can actually sign up for a clinical trial, or you can join a Native American church and they can send you authorization to use psychedelics, or you can join the Sano Daime Church, the Native American Indian Church. There are multiple ways to do that. You could always go to a South American retreat center if you have the money, but you don't really need to take it that far. There is some domestic methods in the United States. So if legality is a concern for you, there's always a way to do it within the parameters allotted to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in a safe manner. I was really intrigued by that show that I saw, Kentucky Ayahuasca. And I know this gentleman isn't the only person out there doing this, but he set up, I guess, his house as a place, the set and the setting to invite people in for their own trips, and he makes his own ayahuasca right there, and I guess it's some sort of a fee that you pay, and it's a very safe environment, and he'll be the trip sitter, and I don't think it's just him. I think it's him, and he's got a team of people, and they guide people on their trips. And so that is a route that people could go if they want to try it. And oftentimes when people try a psychedelic, as we've been talking about this all night, that the effects of it last for quite a while. And so for someone like Rowdy, who is just tired of prescription after prescription that might work, that they have some probably disconcerting side effects, that may be a route to think about, just something to think about if a person is fed up and up against the wall. Because look, Isaac, okay, so it's your life that we're talking about here. It's a person's life. And if you just aren't comfortable in your own skin, is it really that outlandish to turn to something like this to actually get some results? I mean, this is a person's life we're talking about here. And if it's going to take something like that to do it, I say think about it. If it's right for you, maybe you ought to break the rules. When it comes down to a person's life, Isaac, what do you think? You think maybe it's time to take a leap into something like this?
I 100% agree with you because the most dangerous part about psychedelics is getting caught with them. So if you access some and you just use them quickly, you can't get caught with them. Even if let's say you go outside, you get picked up while you're on it, they can't prove anything. So if legality is a concern for you, I recommend checking out the Oratory of Mystical Sacraments, the OMS. They're like Kentucky ayahuasca, but they can send you a personal verification for the legal authority to use natural psychedelics within a safe environment. And they're authorized in the entire United States. So they just ask a few questions and they'll send you a thing. And I think they'll even send you mushrooms once you get approved, and they have a website and everything. But I agree with you. I think that if that's not your route and you can find someone who's going to sell you some mushrooms and you can get them home safely and eat some, I say by all means, go for it.
What is this organization? How do people find that organization?
Just look up the Oratory of Mystical Sacraments, OMS, and it's the same thing that the Kentucky ayahuasca guy uses. That's why he's authorized, but he's not. Anyone can get that and get the authorization. I think it's $250, and you have to sign up and explain why you want to use psychedelics, and it doesn't apply to synthetic substances like LSD. And of course, it doesn't apply if you're trying to sell them on the street and be a drug lord or something. But for personal use, it checks out. So I would recommend looking into that. But like you said, if you can just not get caught, you don't really need it. But if you're concerned about that, it can reduce some of that anxiety, because the fact that psychedelics are illegal concerns some people and it generates some anxiety. Mm-hmm. So if you have that anxiety lifted, it's totally fine. Or just eat your whole stash and you're good.
Well, we're quickly running out of time here, Isaac. This is one of those nights I just don't want it to end. But, I don't want the night to get away from us before I share a little something with you that I think you'll find pretty, I think you'll get a kick out of this. And the audience has probably heard this enough times. They're probably sick of it by now. But I cannot get over how interesting this is. Now, I have this controversial document that was given to me by somebody in my audience. I protect my source, but it is a classified document. It was really a presidential briefing document for then incoming President Bush Sr., 1989, I believe. And it talks all about, it is the historical precedents and current assessment of the situation on UFOs. Now, this document is available at thekingdomofnye.com. Anybody can look at it. Anybody can download it. I'm not charging. It's for free. As soon as I got it, I released it to the public. And now here is something very interesting, Isaac. I think you'll enjoy. Deep into the document, toward the end, there is a description here, and it says there are 4 basic types of EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, so far confirmed. And they are listed here in descending order of their influence in our studies. Now, you've got your Earth-like humanoids, okay? Then you've got your small humanoids or grays. Then you've got your non-humanoid EBEs. And then you get to the very interesting part, the transmorphic entities. And if you'll indulge me, I'd love to share this with you.
Absolutely.
Of all the forms of EBE studied so far by Operation Majestic, these are the most difficult to understand or even give a description of. Essentially, such entities are not beings or creatures. Transmorphic entities exist in some other dimension or plane, which is to say not in our space and time. Now, Isaac, I want you to keep in mind, this is a document from our military. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah. They do not use devices to travel in space. Only once has a member of MJ-12 contact team been privileged to be present when introduced by an Earth-like EBE to a transmorphic entity. In essence, these entities are composed of pure mind energy. They are not unlike ghostly spirits and seem to be only curious about our universe. They are said by other EBEs to be capable of taking on any physical form that they channel their energy into as matter. Now, from what you know so far about the DMT landscape, that you want to prove its existence with the scientific method, how closely aligned is that with what you know so far about these beings?
It sounds like they're talking about the autonomous entities that exist in the psychedelic realm. It's possible that they're one and the same. And now you have me wondering if some of my research is going to be stopped by the government. They're going to be like, oh, you're getting too close here. You're getting shut down. Who knows? They might already be on to me after this radio show ends.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I don't want to get you in any trouble. I'm kind of known for being trouble in the first place. But, yeah, I was told by somebody very well connected that I am not supposed to have that set of papers. And so I'm not generally a conspiracy person much, Isaac. But it is very discouraged. And it is quite illegal. I know once upon a time, if you were in possession of any hits of LSD, any doses, any pieces of little blotter or anything like that, the charge would be conspiracy to overthrow the government. You'd be charged for possession of illegal drugs, but they would also charge you with conspiracy to overthrow the government for being in possession of a psychedelic. Isn't that crazy?
That is insane.
So it makes you really think, right? It really makes you think about things. And that, I thought when I listened to you talk about the beings, I'm like, oh, he's got to hear this.
Yeah, it looks like you're already on the same page as me. And apparently so is the U.S. military, which might not be totally great, but hey, I'm not stopping my research anytime soon. So they'll have to, maybe we can work together. Who knows?
Well, look, I think this stuff is breaking through the surface anyway. I don't think anything can much stop it. I think it has a life of its own, and it wants to be known. These beings want to be known. And so I think you, Isaac, are just a part of that, facilitating that. And I really want to thank you for coming on, spending so much time with us to talk about all of these things. It really has been a treat and an honor to have this conversation with you tonight. Really, I should just say what a trip it is to talk to you.
Yeah, that was absolutely a trip. That was awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'll talk about this stuff with anyone, anytime, so long as the military doesn't make me classify all of my work.
Well, if the Men in Black knock on your door, there's a story. You have to let me know. So how can, I know you've got your website, thelucidtruth.com. How can people listen to your show? When is your show on? That sort of thing. Is it live? Is it a podcast? What do you got with The Lucid Truth?
It is a podcast, and it's on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. And right now I don't have a set schedule. I just release it like whenever. I feel like it. I think maybe I will set a set schedule. So if I do, that will be on the show. but for now it's kind of really relaxed and liberal. But we're going into the nature of consciousness. That's the next series on the show. So it's going to be right along these lines. So if you enjoyed this conversation, you're going to be able to find more of it on that network. And things are definitely going to be getting interesting over there.
Well, I thought it was really interesting when I went to your website, lucidtruth.com, which is also linked up at thekingdomofnye.com. If you look at Isaac Lindenberger's page that we have for him up on the website, you'll find the link there. But it's really easy to remember, thelucidtruth.com. I noticed that you've got episodes right there. So all of the episodes of your show free? They're not behind a paywall?
Yeah, they're totally free.
Well, doesn't get much better than that. Wow. Well, great. It's super easy. If anybody wants to listen to your show, they can go to your website and just pick one. I notice on your website it says there the guest that you had on and what you guys talked about at that particular episode. So real easy for people to find you. And are you on social media or anything like that? Where can people keep up with you, Isaac?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. It's just Isaac Lindenberger. You can find me on there. Just send me a request, and I post stuff about this all the time. We're always having great conversations about the nature of reality and exploring the mechanisms of consciousness. So, yeah, just join the conversation. I'm happy to bring it to whoever wants to listen.
Well, I sure hope this isn't the last time that we do a show that I get to talk to you on this show, because, gosh, I mean, you are just so easy and laid back to talk to, and I really appreciate that in a guest. So I hope this isn't the last time, and I know I've kept you up pretty late here tonight, but I will get out of your hair here, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful evening speaking with you, all of these things. I hope maybe we've educated some people out there or made people think about some of these odd and weird things, and I just cannot thank you enough. Really, really cool. Well, Isaac Lindenberger, everybody. Pretty neat and interesting conversation. Like I say, you can go to his website, thelucidtruth.com. All of his shows are available there for free. He has had some amazing, amazing guests on his show. If you want to keep up with him, do check him out on the social media out there. And look, the psychedelic shift is happening. It's taking place. And Isaac Lindenberger is one of those who is helping that move along into the consciousness. I'm out of time. That's our show, everybody. I'll catch you tomorrow night. And tonight, well, tonight has, I think, been a very good one. Be good to each other out there. Good night.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Heather Wade. She is quite the amazing host. I appreciate her honest and serious inquiry into topics many people are afraid to touch, for fear of looking ungrounded from reality. But such creativity and bravery can lead to truly profound insights. Normally, this is when I make an announcement as to who will be on the show next. However, I'm truly not sure who it will be. I recently did an interview with Cullen Smith from Lifting the Veil. However, I'm not sure when it will be released. In the meantime, I advise checking out his channel. It's very philosophically interesting. You can find the Lucid Truth podcast on our website, thelucidtruth.com, or on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. You can support it by sharing it with your friends, donating on Patreon, or following us on your favorite podcatcher. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you for the next episode of The Lucid Truth.